I personally don't like pre-rigging because I like to check everything, and I think pre-rigging gets you out of checking things.
And it also you forget.
You forget
if you can pull something, if you can pull a haul system out of a bag and clip it onto two trees and you're good to go, then you forget how to rig the system.
Right.
So, it's a 6 one, half dozen the other kind of a thing. It's a tough call.
Yeah, and I think there's something that helps with sizing up things while you're rigging it there in those couple minutes. Where usually a couple minutes added to it doesn't hurt, and it greatly adds to the safety. That's like with missing person incidents. I'm all about investigation. I wanna stay up all night before we go out. If we're doing a shift in the morning, do all the research I can to save time in the field, and just learn everything I can about it. Do you have a favorite search story?
Favorite search story. I have a favorite, probably rescue recovery story.
Okay.
When you asked me to be on this, I was kind of going over in my head some of the more interesting missions. We had been called out, it was late in the evening, of somebody that was trapped over a waterfall. And one of the interesting things about San Diego County is the diversity of terrain that we have here. We would be anywhere from the coast, where we would do a cliff collapse, looking for people under a cliff collapse, up into the mountains. We think our tallest mountain here is 6,000 feet. So we would be in the trees. We would be in snow. We could be in the desert. So we had a very variety of terrain here. And we've been called for somebody over a falls, and great tech rescue mission. A lot of people rush out there, and we get there and it's dark, and we had to hike in for a little ways, and we got there and we got to a cliff where there was probably 4 feet of water, maybe 6 inches deep, that was going off this cliff. And there was a rope that was attached to a bolt at the top of this cliff, and it went over the cliff. And we couldn't see, no matter how much we looked over this cliff, how far this was down. And I remember that chaos moment. We ended up with, I think, 3 agencies there, all trying to get off over this cliff at night. And we had very little information about the status of the patient that was over the side. We later found out that the patient was already deceased. But we didn't know that night, but we found out later. And I remember at one point I was kind of trying to organize this, and I had people that were ready to go over the side, and it just didn't feel right. And I put a stop to it. And I says, all right, we don't know where we're at. We can't get the helicopter to fly anymore. We're just going to hold. And there was a lot of chaos that night over that decision. And ultimately the next morning we flew that in a helicopter, and that waterfall that we were going down was literally, it was called Mildred Falls. You can look it up on the web. Is between 200 and 300 feet tall because there's a step in it. Oh. And yeah, I did not realize that there was such a tall waterfall in San Diego County. And looking back at it and looking at what ended up happening to the guy who passed away down there, had we sent somebody over that falls that night without knowing what was over there, I am pretty convinced that we probably would have seriously injured or killed one of our own team that night. So, as a searcher and as someone in command, that was a decision that haunted me that night. But once we had the whole full picture, I'm pretty convinced that we saved somebody from getting really hurt that night.
Well, and people don't realize that no recovery is worth someone's life. And it's
exactly.
And it sounds cold, and what we really say is no dead body's worth a live body. I tried to sweeten that up a little bit, but that's the bottom line. And you just don't want to compound the mission. And nowadays, you do something, and you can have the best of intentions. It goes wrong, and it's on 80 million camera phones with people dissecting it on the web who weren't there and don't know any of the emotions running and any of the things. And you've just got to weigh it out. And that's, and I think to a degree, I think we, in this country, we always overcompensate. And I think that we went from basically, like in the fire service, you went from people with leather boots and 10 helmets and everything to doing the best they can. And now we overcompensate. And I think that to a degree, and you may disagree with me, and feel free to. I'm eager to learn, but I think that we've gone to almost where we're overtraining at some points, and I think that we're trying to give people too much training too soon and not space it out through their journey through the vocations. And I think that you shouldn't be able to join search and rescue and be taking MSO, management and search operations, in your first 6 months or your first year. You're not ready.
I would I think what you're trying to say is nothing beats experience, and no amount of training beats the experience that only comes with time. And if am I correct in saying that's what you're trying to say?
Yeah, close enough. And I just think that we give the illusion of experience to certifications.
Yes, I would agree with that.
And
I would agree with that.
There's so many people that join and they go, I've got this, I've got that, and they think that enables that. And we see a lot of times when agencies will bulk sell their certification process to different agencies like law enforcement who does it internally. You show up for a training and everybody's certificate is pre-printed. And when you come in the door and you see it pre-printed, you know what the outcome is. You just gotta survive it, and you'll get your certificate. And I think it's I'm always interested in trainings and how many people did not pass. Because if the number's always zero, then there's some kind of a problem. And I'm not saying that people should not pass at all. Like I've always felt better when canine handlers fail one of their tests. It builds a little character. And if everybody's passing, then there's something wrong. There's something wrong.
I having done the academy for many years, I understand exactly what you're saying. That is, not everybody that starts should finish. And, it's not for most of the searches and most of the missions, nothing's going to go wrong. But for that 5%, you want to have the A team. You want to make sure that that someone's not going to get hurt. I mean, I think that was probably more so in fire than it was in search and rescue, but search and rescue was up there too. One of my biggest fears was always getting somebody hurt. Making the wrong decision and somebody on my team or anybody for that matter, even the person we were looking for, getting hurt. And that's something that you can mitigate a lot of that by having a team that is ready and well prepared and well trained. And I was on my team. I was probably one that pushed everybody really hard. If you want to be in the field, then you got to do these trainings. There is no shortcuts. And, that's a tough thing to do sometimes.
Our team trains twice a week. We train on Wednesday evenings and Sunday days. We have teams out here that train once a month. And if something happens and you miss that training, then it's every other month, or you take off for the holidays, you skip a month. It's just not enough. And then you have people that overtrain, I feel, that spend their summers on their training world tours, and they go all over, and they will get a dog and they will spend, half of that dog's life with it in training, and it's like the training to actual field time ratio is way off. You know, and it always comes to a head with me when people can't respond to a missing person incident because they're at trainings or they're doing this or doing that.
Well, we always had a rule that an actual real mission always trumped a training. So all trainings would be canceled if there was a real mission. So that wasn't a problem for us, at least, because we had that as a policy.
Well, we have that rule too, but I'm talking about the people that, you know, they go
you're
away.
Talking about people it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, somebody goes to Texas for a canine seminar 2 weeks a year, you know, and it's like, it's like, you know, how much are, and it's just, they lose perspective. And I think that we changed over somewhere in there from when I started to certified used to mean qualified. And now it means attend, you know.
Everybody gets a gold star.
Yeah, everybody gets a gold star. Everybody gets a participation award, and it's just gotten watered down. But we also, on the other hand, we're overcompensating by making the requirements, especially in the fire service, on a volunteer EMS too. They've made the requirements so high that you can't be a volunteer EMT anymore, really. It's just too difficult, too much time.
Yeah, keeping all your certifications, all your CEs. Yep,
right.
Exactly.
And you have to, you have to go through that cycle, and then it becomes much more difficult. And I see that combined with other things, we have this incredible in volunteer services all over, and I think it's probably the same out there where you are. We have a recruitment issue, and we also have a retention issue that's got to be addressed, or else tax dollars are going to have to come from somewhere, because problems are not going to solve themselves. People are not going to stop doing wacky things. And I think the thing about search and rescue versus other vocations is that people get numb to fire. They get numb to people hurting themselves. They get numb to police incidents and stuff like that. And it's regrettable, but they do get numb to it. But when somebody doesn't show what they're supposed to be, it invokes all the things of a classic mystery. You know, how is that possible? That could be me. And then people get interested. And lots of times on missing person cases, I tell people that when we find a person, don't expect to have a solution. You will have a new set of questions, and you will have a solution to one question, maybe more, but you'll get more questions when you find a person, you know.
Well, sometimes you could find somebody, though, the more interesting ones where you could find somebody that had been out, or a group that had been out for a period of time. And I always thought it was interesting sitting down and talking to them and learning, okay, when did you realize you were lost? What precipitated this? And then you get the dynamics of what was going on, especially when you got a group. When you got a group, and you can interview them individually, and you start to get when the disagreements started to happen, and when one was going to go this way and one was going to go that way. That was always a good learning experience for me. I always enjoyed, the debrief of the people that we had found that had been out there for a little while.
Well, yeah, and it sounds like that's a really polite version of what the heck were you thinking? You know? Yeah. Oh, yeah,
there was definitely some stories of that. It's like, you did what?
Yeah. Who's running the brain trust over here? And
yes.
And why is it every time I come here for a missing person, there's no pants? What do you do with all the pants? You know? Well, yeah, we've got we had a Thanksgiving thing, you know, because that's topical, and we went and got the guy, and we found them, and there was this drinking party, and your urgency goes down when you find a person. They've got an alcoholic beverage in their hand, and then somehow in the chaos, clothing disappears, and you deal with Winnie the Pooh. He's walking around with just a top on. And it's like you get him back from a police car, and hey, we're going to get home in time for dinner. We got to miss just the right amount of interaction with the family. And the guy slithers out the window like a snake and runs off. And I'm like, I don't really have a hard rule on this, but we really only once, and we found them. Not going back again. I mean, this guy doesn't want to be found at this point. And that's one of the